Hello and welcome to Sacred Psychology, the podcast for misfits and mystics. Here, neuroscience and spirituality go hand in hand. Join me, Tamara Powell, on a no-holds-barred adventure outside the box, because that's where all the truly great shit happens anyway. Welcome back to Sacred Psychology. I'm your host, Tamara Powell. Happy New Year, y'all. I hope this next chapter of life for you has already gotten off to an amazing start. Whether you're totally high-vibing it, or you're perhaps struggling a little bit as we speak, today's topic is going to be the perfect rocket fuel for creating and sustaining that inner fire for all the things. But before we get into that, I have to take a quick moment and tell you how you can come hang out with me. Yes, virtually for 6 months, starting in February, and totally revolutionize everything about your life and the way you navigate achieving your goals and deep, long-lasting inner peace. Trust me, I know this one firsthand, both clinically and personally. So if you, my dear, are ready to not only know what you are meant to do on this planet, but to truly own it and feel the joy and satisfaction that results. If you, my dear, find yourself feeling like there's got to be more to life than this, if you, my dear, are tired of second-guessing yourself in relationships with others, and if you've ever felt like you have the words too much or not enough written across your forehead, and it seems like everyone treats you as such. Or, my dear, if you're feeling like you've hit a plateau in life, business, or personal and spiritual development, and you just crave more awesome in general, then I'm inviting you to allow me and a very exclusive set of other rebel souls to stir the waters of your beautiful tempest, mind, body, and spirit. Head on over to ariatherapy.com/The Sanctuary and learn how you can come hang with world-renowned experts and like-minded soul sisters. I'll have a link to this in the show notes as well, so don't sweat it. But I can't wait to see you. Don't delay, though. Doors close at the end of this month, and space is limited. And now, on with today's show. My guest is Elena Sonnino. She's a sought-after guide for living fully in the now to step into the spotlight of your life. As a life coach, speaker, and yoga teacher, her work is an invitation to unearth and attune to inner strength and wisdom, what she calls the sunrise in your pocket. God, I love that. She inspires individuals and groups to remove self-imposed obstacles and explore the now with curiosity and gratitude so that they can step into the spotlight of their life. Personally, I knew I'd love this woman when I read her Finding Flight manifesto. Listen to this. She writes, "I believe that the more you are willing to fall, the stronger you will be when you rise up and try again. I believe that gratitude, laughter, and movement are keys to unlocking the mysteries of life. I believe in the power of butterflies, moving water, and mountain energy. I believe in adventure travel as a way to discover unearthed parts of our true selves. I believe that we all need an epic belly flop every now and then. I believe that we are all survivors. More importantly, we are all warriors. It isn't the act of falling that defines us. It is what we do next that matters." Can I get an amen? So without further ado, I give you the one, the only, the ever incomparable Elena Sonnino. Hey, Elena, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here.
Me too, girl. I want to talk about this super important topic of coming to embody our inner strength. And it sounds so easy and like sugary on the surface, but it's really not.
I love that. But oh no, it is a practice that, as much as I talk about it and feel like I've got a hold on it, I have to come back to it every single day. And some days are better than others.
So true. So for those of my listeners who aren't familiar with you yet, can you tell us a little bit about you and your journey thus far and why this is even a big subject for you?
Sure. Wow. I'm like, where exactly does one be? Yes.
Wherever you want, birth, conception, don't care.
Right. Well, it's, well.
Your past lives, I don't know.
Exactly. Well, so, a few nutshell things about me, right? The thing that I've realized now, I'm 44, almost at that. And the one thing that I've come to realize is that at the very, very end of the day, the place that I know I can find everything I need is within me. It is that core of inner strength. And throughout my life, I have had so many opportunities to have that show up without me really realizing. It took me years to realize, hey, actually, like all of those things, they came from me. And so this all really started, or I didn't realize it started. I was, strong personality as a kid, all those things, and was healthy. And in my early 20s, so 1997, I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Oh, wow.
And at that time, I had literally gotten engaged 6 days prior to my diagnosis. I was in exactly at the right place at the right time. My fiance, who I didn't end up marrying, his dad was a radiologist. Their family best friend was a cardiologist, and we were sitting at their Passover Seder table, and the lymph node at the base of my neck had exploded. I mean, it didn't explode. It was big. Yeah. It became the size of a ping pong ball. And I worked as a preschool teacher at the time, had been feeling on and off, not great all winter, but you work with 3 and 5-year-olds, you think, well, that's normal.
Right. And you make do.
Absolutely. You just, more antibiotics, please. And this happened. And, and my dad's a now retired neurosurgeon. I mean, my life was kind of designed for me to be exactly where I needed to be. And so I was seen very, very quickly. I was diagnosed. I had 6 months of chemotherapy. We picked a chemotherapy that didn't have implications for fertility, because one of the things I wanted most in the world was to be a mom.
Oh, yeah.
A teacher and a mom. Those were my two things, right? And fast forward, I recurred 5 months later. At that point, they were like, yeah, well, maybe we need to do something a little bit more aggressive. So they essentially treated me for prepped me for a bone marrow transplant. But this is like the magic moment that I didn't realize for years and years later. My stem cells were healthy. So it was an autologous transplant.
Whoa.
Yeah. So they got my cells from me. Right. And so, this was kind of when I realized this all these years later.
Whole metaphor for life. I see where you're going.
Yeah. Right. And then, fast forward several years, the lung damage that I had incurred from that first chemotherapy that didn't have impact on fertility, but did have, oh, by the way, a possibility of lung damage. But I was like, no big deal, because my oncologist explained it as, well, you'll just never run a marathon. And I was like, easy peasy, because I don't run 3 miles.
Right.
So then fast forward many years later, a friend said, well, we were in Boston for the weekend of the Boston Marathon. It just happenstance. I wasn't there, specifically for the marathon. But she said to me, she was a runner. She goes, you could totally run a marathon, maybe the Marine Corps Marathon. I live in the DC area, which is where that is. And I went, no. But somehow on the drive back from Boston to DC, that little nugget that the oncologist had planted, almost 10 years prior, I went, because I like to do things when I'm told I can't. And so, I'd never really be able to have my own kids. All right. I won't be able to run. I mean, all of these things that I was told I wouldn't be able to do. Well, I ran 1 marathon. I ended up running 5 marathons.
Whoa.
But yeah, slow, really slow, but that's okay. But the reason I tell that story is because in that first marathon, I met the man. So I've had 3 engagements, two weddings. I've had a lot of wedding dresses.
I love that though.
Happily remarried now. But my first husband, I met training for that marathon. So I literally can connect the dots to getting sick, to meeting him. And then, oh, by the way, having my own daughter from me, right? We had paid for a donor egg, all the things. And then my body actually, again, showed up. And so all of these reminders are nudges in my life of, hey, like, by the way, you're not as weak as you think you are. You just have to tune in. Like, you've got to honor this thing that's inside, this inner strength, this inner wisdom, and and nurture it, but it's there for you. You just have to be willing to see it and maybe a lot of times get out of your own way. So that's over the course of my life been really the theme that has unknowingly to me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was when I tuned into that I really feel like things came into super crystal clear focus about my life's work. I, had always wanted to be a teacher, but the thing that I loved about teaching wasn't lecturing. It wasn't grading papers.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't, any of those things. It was asking really fabulous questions and inspiring my students to have thoughtful conversations, right? With themselves, with each other, with the world. And so and even as a young child, I was always that person that, my friends called me mom, but it wasn't, I was a nudger. So there was that, but I was always the person people knew that they could come to ask questions back to, right? To help them kind of find a little bit of clarity. So when all of these pieces started becoming crystal clear for me, it finally felt like I was home in myself. If that makes any sense.
It makes so much sense. And you actually do ask amazing questions. I have a few of yours that I want to get into in a little bit, but I find this paradox that you are describing so fascinating, both as a clinician and as a woman of, on one hand, we are groomed from a very early age that the ultimate authority for our lives lies outside of us, with our primary caregivers, with our religious worldview, right? It's in a god or a goddess or a system, with the government. And then we're also taught, though, we're told, but you need to be a strong, independent woman. And that inner conflict of, okay, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be strong and find my own strength, but also not rock the boat too much and to trust you, even in your situation, the medical system, that they know the right course of treatment for you.
Yeah.
And so what do you do with that? Can you talk to me a little bit about that struggle? And maybe even particularly, I know men have it as well, but about why in certain nuances, it's even more complicated when you're female.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's such it's such an important thing. And I think it is such a big contrast and one that looks different for each of us. And frankly, from day to day. I grew up, right? My dad was a neurosurgeon. I'm now married to an engineer. There are people with systems and structures that I remember going into that first doctor's office. And the reason actually, now that I say that out loud, the reason that I chose the oncologist that I chose is he looked at me and he looked at the band of people I had around me. And he said, hold on, I have to get more chairs.
Oh.
And the reason that I think that actually applies to this idea of this paradox is it is a paradox and it is a struggle. But I think when we bring that human element, that connected aspect, that's where we can navigate that paradox, that contrast, right? Because it's in those human moments. Because yes, right, so even when I was sick, needing, and then, a failed engagement, a failed marriage, all of I have to be strong. I have to be able to take care of myself, all of the things, God, all of those aspects. There is also this vulnerability that for me is really important. And that I think for women in particular who have a hard time asking and then receiving help.
Yeah.
Right. Asking that's where we then can live into tapping into what's inside, but not as islands.
Right.
So to me, I think the biggest learning has been because after I got divorced, I didn't want to have to rely on anybody. The first few years of being remarried, it was a struggle because, even frankly in parenting, co-parenting our daughter, who's, it's my husband's stepdaughter, it was, I kind of had walls up, right? I had to take care of these things. And so it's learning that strength doesn't have to mean we go it alone. And tapping into that inner strength doesn't mean that we can't receive from others. There's that difference to me between choosing to receive from others and being afraid not to receive from others. I'm trying to think about those words as I say them, right? If that's it, it's that if it only comes from others, if the validation, the information, if we feel like that, we can only rely on that, that's where we get into trouble, right? As opposed to allowing ourselves to receive and experience kind of that human tendency and vulnerability, and then choosing, knowing, being super aligned or attuned rather to what's inside. So then we can discern, okay, so this is what they say. Is that what feels good? Right. And also kind of lastly on that, it's okay to not know. And sometimes we have to be able to be honest with ourselves to say, I don't know what I don't know. And I kind of have to go with my gut. And if my gut says I have this doctor or I have this, religious leader, spiritual leader, frankly, coach, therapist, anybody, right?
Anybody.
Who I trust on a human level, then maybe that's okay. Maybe I can allow them into the boundary and make space for that and discern as I go. Does that answer your question?
It really does. It's about if I'm understanding you correctly, and my heart really resonates with it, the power of autonomy that we each have, and choosing to be mindful of it, to be aware of it, and then to consciously use our discernment to navigate and to allow for how much does each of us need in that moment. And as I've also been proposed to 3 times now, married twice.
Yes.
But divorced twice. And I have 2 daughters, that piece of how much do I allow others in and how much do I not? Especially my fans know I'm a huge Enneagram nut. And as a type 7 on the Enneagram, it's a personality assessment. Our core fear from my particular type is, can I rely upon others? And having to flip-flop that once in a while, very similar to you, after a divorce, I didn't want to rely on anyone. It hurt.
Yeah.
But there are times that I want to let other people in, whether it's in co-parenting, etc. But finding that space when I love the reframe of, I'm choosing this in the moment, and yet at the same time, I know that if they quote unquote fail me, that my inner strength will carry me regardless. Right.
And that I'll end up where I need to be. Right. If as long as you choose discernment, and I think knowing your values, knowing kind of what's the core of you, at your foundation, your soul level, and making sure the discernment honors those values.
Yes.
Even if we quote unquote falter, right? To me, there's a quote, Coel Simpson is an equus coach. So she does a lot of coaching with horses and equestrian settings. And she says, there is no failure, there's only feedback.
Oh, that is a good tweetable moment right there.
Right. And that to me is, all right, so let's say I choose something and it wasn't the correct right path. That's okay, right? As long as I'm checking in and realizing, I'm still learning. I'm still gathering information. I'm learning something about myself. I'm learning something about this experience. And then what, right? So the autonomy piece is so important. And it's funny that you mentioned reliability. So we're moving, and my parents were here this weekend, and they're talking about renting an apartment in Venice, Italy, which is where my mom is from. And we're all Italian for about 18 months. And my whole thing was, they're in their 70s, and I'm beginning to realize they're not going to be around forever.
Right.
And reliability came up for me of, this reliability of them being there. And of course, that's not reliable at the end of the day, because we're human. And it was an interesting thing and then I started to reframe it for myself and started thinking about, well, where am I reliable to myself? Where, kind of those types of questions. And it was really interesting for me to reflect on. And I think is important when we think about discernment and giving away that power to others for that inner strength.
Yes. So in perfect synchronicity, this episode, I believe, will be the first one of season 4, which is launching right after the new year. And so we think about that really powerful time. It almost feels like the veil is thin in a different way when we're embracing a new year, right? Everyone's got their fresh notebooks out, their journals, their new gym membership. We're all trying to decide what goals we want. Maybe we're setting a theme word for the year, setting our intentions for what we want to manifest. And I think this topic is so key for that. So I would love to hear, I know I didn't prep you for this, but what do you think about that sweet spot, that optimal alignment with goal setting, yet offering flow when we're talking about tuning into our inner strength? Any thoughts on that?
Oh my goodness. So many and none at all. How's that?
Yeah.
Well, right. Because it's so funny. I used to consider, I taught kids how to write goals, right? Mm-hmm. SMART goals were my thing. Benchmarks, indicators, all the things. And then I did a full 360 because I was a type A goal setter, but I was also perpetually unsatisfied, right? Mm-hmm. Those marathons, the first three, right? The first one I ran to prove the doctor wrong. The second one I ran to prove that the first wasn't a fluke. Right?
I love it.
Yeah. 3 and 4 happened several years later, but to improve my time. And literally, was it actually 3? And then at the end of 3, I had taken 15 minutes off my time, but I was shy of the time that I wanted. I was in tears. Right? No. I couldn't enjoy it. I mean, all of these things. So then I ran another one 6 weeks later, and this perpetually unsatisfied was literally my thing. And so I essentially banished goals from my life. Like, nope, have to think about intention. It's all intention from my heart. How do I want to feel when I go to sleep at night? And that felt good. And then I realized, wait a minute, because I still want things, and not admitting that it's a lie, right? To myself. I mean, I was depriving myself of that truth. So over the last year or two, I've really started playing with trying to find that sweet spot of saying, okay, these are the things I want, and getting really, really specific, right? But in that specificity, then using that as an opportunity to notice, all right, what is it about that? Like, because that specificity is usually tied to wanting a feeling, right? We're craving a way that we want to feel. So the specificity, the goal is okay. But for me, the sweet spot comes in attaching it to an emotion and a feeling. And then the alignment comes from, and the non-attachment. Because for me, the sweet spot of any goal setting, manifesting, whatever you want to call it, is holding something without expectation. I tried to learn to surf a few years ago, and the instructor said to me, can you practice determination without expectation?
Another tweetable moment.
Yeah. And so that has really been a key for me, because I realize when I start holding on, when I start gripping to a certain craving, a certain desire, even intentions, right? To me, I mean, intentions, because frankly, it's right for goals, depending how you do it, right? But there becomes this, the word will come to me exactly when I don't need it. But it's a
bit of like a clinging and attachment even to the intention.
Yeah. And then even affirmations, frankly, they run the risk. Yeah. I mean, the more I follow Jeanette Ma, who has a podcast called LOA Recon, and she talks about lots of law of attraction. And I'm not a huge law of attraction person, but she's very relatable. And so I started, kind of thinking about from her this idea of, she does pray rain journaling, right? So when you journal from the perspective of already having that thing, so feeling into it. And I realized, I can do all the affirmations, I can do all of that journaling, but when I start getting clingy about it, that's where I get into trouble. So that sweet spot for me is really coming back to, all right, how is this going to feel? And if I can stay in the feeling of it, then I can allow it to emerge and show up in totally unexpected ways, and then actually pay attention to it, right? Because I think a lot of people don't even realize when these things are happening in their lives.
Yeah, they don't notice. They miss the evidence. Yeah.
Yeah. So to me, I think there's the sweet spot in attaching the feeling state to it, and really that's where the attunement comes in. How do you energetically, what does that feel like? What does that look like? What does that sound like? I'm a big proponent of music. So when I try to come up with goals or intentions, I usually create a playlist that feels like that. Yeah.
Ooh, that is a great tip. If you get nothing else from this episode, I like that one.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Because to me, music and something about the vibration and the singing, whatever it is, I'm from the age where we created cassette tapes for everybody, right?
Me too. I'm right behind you in age.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah. So there's just something about that, creating that playlist that for me, and then singing to it out loud, in the shower, in the car, wherever I am, that helps me energetically get into that feeling. And then I can look around and be like, all right, where does this actually already exist in my life? That's another great question, because where you can start to see where it's already showing up, then you're that much closer to it.
Amen.
Yeah.
So, just to synthesize then, from my perspective as a therapist, I'm super nerdy and also hella spiritual. So I love bridging the gap. Like, I think that's what my soul came here to do, is to, make spirituality practical and make science accessible, a little more spiritual.
Love it.
When we're talking about goal setting, and I am super type A, my playlists have playlists. They're all color coded and beautiful, and I love them. When we're talking about goal setting and also like law of attraction, manifestation work, to me, it's about the self-fulfilling prophecy piece. And so I love that you are adding in these very important practical steps of, are you noticing the evidence of this thing? Do you even know what that is going to feel like? Do you know why you want this thing? And so let's break it down. It's going to be the new year. A lot of people are going to, for example, want to lose weight. What would you do with a client who comes to you and she's been binge dieting on and off for like 30 years and her metabolism's shot and she just feels so defeated, but she wants to give it another go? Where do we start with her?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first place that I like to start is to think about the story, right? Kind of the identity of the person that she's been and the person she thinks she wants to be, right? Based on the feelings. So the story she's been telling is something like, I try, it never sticks. I know what to do. I just can't make it last, kind of those types of stories, right? And then there are character traits of that story, of that person, right? Somebody who, and so naming those things, because I think it's important not to judge them, but just name it.
Yeah.
Like, okay. And then flip side of, all right, but how do I want to feel? What do I want to be doing with my day, right? How do I want to, and it really does come back to how do I want to feel at the end of the day and a year from now. And a lot of times it's really, it's not about the number, right? It's not about the clothing size. It's strength, it's love, it's whatever it is. And then starting to almost literally write a new narrative. I mean, I've done this for myself.
Yes.
So for me, I had a story for, even with this whole inner strength kind of motto, that my body wasn't taking care of me, right? Even though I knew at the end of the day, right, I was sick, all these
betrayed you with leukemia.
Yeah. And even for weight, right? So I essentially rewrote a story. I kind of wrote it from the perspective of my body. And so,
that's good.
I'm radiant. I move in the way I need to. And really starting to think about the body as kind of a conduit, a vehicle for the life that we want to live. So I think the first place to start is really naming the identity of the past, and then deciding, hey, is that the identity that I want to continue to be cloaked in? And assuming that it's not, then narrating, what is this new identity? And you can even like create an avatar, right? I mean, for people that are visual, find images, find colors, find symbols that represent this identity, and then create a story. Add to it every single day. What does this body want to be, right? And then letting it emerge, right? I think we have to give ourselves the possibility to let that truest strength, that inner wisdom emerge from us. And part of it comes down to treating our body as an ally rather than something that we always have to fight against.
I love that, because then all of the tools, even the super awesome one of creating a playlist of what that woman would look like and feel like if she were experiencing those feelings of love and strength and confidence, so even other tools like what is she putting in her body? How is she moving her body? They just become a natural outworking of that narrative that she's rewriting.
Yes.
And then it becomes easy to find evidence.
Absolutely. Well, and that's the piece, right? Because if you're only focused on numbers or clothing or that type of thing, you're going to miss all of the other evidence.
Yeah.
I shared. So when I rewrote the narrative for myself, I turned it into a blog post. So I'd be happy to share it with you.
Yes, please. We'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah.
Would love to see that. Super
because
practical.
It's a place to start, right? And I titled it, See Your Body as the Hero in Your Hero's Journey.
That's
because
awesome.
it was really, for a long time, I realized I wasn't being kind to my body. And so how could I possibly want it to take care of me if I wasn't taking care of it?
Mm-hmm.
And so really beginning to see it as a partner, as an ally, and also having faith that whatever is our truest, best self is within us, rather than believing that we have to be fixed.
Yeah. Such a powerful distinction, and one that I don't think most men and women even realize is in there. It's almost like it's just running on autopilot.
Right. We're always striving, right? I mean, I at some point posed the question to myself, and then I also teach yoga, and so I used it for a while as kind of a theme and intention in class. When was the last time that you stopped, that you weren't trying to fix something about yourself? Right? Even from the
Elena.
smallest, I know. I mean, it's right. And I mean, look, I'm human. I do all the time. But when you check in and when you notice that that's where you're operating from, and you think, okay, could I live? Could I feel? Could I just be, instead of always trying to fix, right? And the shift.
Ugly cry here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here's the other thing. Back to your, the question, the example of, someone who wants to lose weight at the beginning of the new year. When we go in to that goal, believing that we have to be fixed, we're not setting ourselves up for success. I know that the times where I've lost weight in my life, or that I've been, frankly, even having my own daughter, right? Naturally, it's when I stopped trying. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't try, right? We shouldn't drink water and eat whole foods and all of whatever it is. But it's when, to some degree, that over-analysis paralysis.
Yes.
And I've done Weight Watchers, Tracked Food, years and years ago. And I have a client right now who actually, we talked it through, and she really likes systems and structures, but she realized that the constant, counting points and all of that thing was keeping her in that old identity, and that her new identity was choosing foods that she knew were nurturing and nourishing, and going out for a walk. And so, and she's been doing that now for months and feeling fabulous.
Right.
So,
and research really backs that up too, that when we are more focused on adding in what we know our mind, body, spirit need, we have less time and room for this shit that's not working anyway. It doesn't help. You're not going to crave that giant piece of cake when you have filled up on the stuff that feels good.
Yeah, absolutely.
You might just need a bite, and you could still have that bite.
And look, let me be totally honest. I had Nutella on bread for breakfast this morning.
Me too.
See, I knew it. Well, we are in between houses right now, and we're moving this week. And so my kitchen, and in both places, has just enough and not enough of anything, right? And I'm like, oh, there's still Nutella in the pantry. Huh, interesting. Do I have bread? No, there is some in the pantry. So
everything in moderation, including moderation itself.
Well, yes. But it also goes, it goes to that thing, like that feeling, right? Why am I having it? Well, in part because I'm scrounging in my kitchen, but also because that felt joyful to me. To have a little bit of Nutella, not a lot, just felt really joyful. And so those are the moments, to amplify. Making those choices. But one of my favorite questions is, what would feel delicious?
In every sense of the word.
In every sense of the word.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So to get a little meta with it, as I move this, what do you personally define as inner strength and wisdom? What does that look like? Because it really is a bit of a whitewash, sugar-coated, sugary, coachy word these days.
Absolutely it is. Yeah. So to me, the definition of inner strength and wisdom is my core essence, right? It is that core essence of each of us that knows and has everything we need and crave inside. And it is that thing that has existed for us always, but that we add so many layers on as we grow out of childhood, right? And we stop being curious. We stop kind of being delighted by things, and all of the shoulds and all of the expectations and to-do lists get thrown on top. And that part of us that just knows, it's that feeling you get when you decide to do something that doesn't make any sense, right? That the timing is horrible, but at your very core, you just know to do it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That to me is that inner strength. It's that little voice, and it can be teeny tiny, right? When we haven't been listening to it for a while, but it's that little part of us that just knows.
So it sounds like then coming to embody that would mean, number one, being aware of it, stripping back all the layers of operant conditioning and beginning to learn how to hear it again, and then actually acting upon what you believe to be true, to be authentic for you.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
And that can be the hardest part, right? Especially, when I ask people, clients, some of my podcast community, what's so hard for you about tapping into that inner strength? And the number one thing people say is trusting it, right? How do I know that it's right? Well, we don't, right. is part of the answer. And that has to be okay, right? The understanding that embodying piece, I think there are a lot of layers even to that. Once you've attuned to it, once you've made space for it, that embodiment piece, that takes practice too. And it takes just being willing to try something without everything having to have meaning attached.
Mm-hmm. And stop writing your own damn narratives on everything.
Yeah. Right? Just doing something because, and that's where I think if somebody wants to play with this, even just starting on, a weekend morning or some time where you've got some, let's call it, free time in air quotes, that, even just asking that question, hey, what would feel delicious today? And waiting, like tuning into that little voice and doing that one thing, right? If we can start to practice listening and acting based on that voice in ways that feel non-threatening, then I think we start to create, a file of evidence that says, all right, well, we can trust this.
Which brings me to something that you write on your website that I totally love. So when we're trying to learn how to trust it, and people are so afraid of getting it wrong, right? Like, whoops, I thought I was listening to my intuition in the past. And then it was like one of those moments of look at your life, look at your choices, and people tend to cringe. Yeah. Well, you say it isn't the act of falling that defines us, but it's what we do next that matters.
Yes.
So good.
Because, well, it to me, it has to be, because otherwise I would be in my bed, never getting out. There's that idea of, all right, so something didn't go the way you wanted it. Okay, now what? Right? It's that believing we have a choice. And life is going to happen. There are going to be things that don't feel good. That has to be okay. And I believe really strongly that one does not have to exclude the other, right? That it's an and, not an or. So you can fall, you can falter, something cannot go the way you thought.
And now what?
Right. Rather than, oh, now I have to start back over. No, because you've learned something in between.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that's really, to me, growth is not a destination. It's a journey. Right? I mean, if we think about all of those growth charts that we had growing up, that we have for our kids, I mean, well, eventually they stop because they don't keep going as far as the actual charts. But if you use just a door frame, it's that idea of, and even when they stop physically growing, there's emotional growth. There's so many different types of growth. So seeing it as a process rather than a destination, to me, is what can keep us remembering that we have to get back up, that's where the magic lies. That's where I think the transformation lies, because it's in those moments that we get back up that we really align, or have the opportunity to align to our values and our big kind of why.
Yep. Like you say, it makes such great sense. Like you say, we all need an epic belly flop every now and then.
Oh my gosh. Well, yes.
It's true.
Absolutely.
The transformation lies there. It's good. Get back up.
Yeah. Well, and that all came from surfing, right? From when I went to try to learn to surf, and really I learned the epic belly flop instead. And I mean, they were the most joyful epic belly flops ever. Yes. And now whenever I go surfing again, people are like, all right, where are the epic belly flops? I'm like, oh, trust me. They'll happen.
They're going to happen. Just be prepared. Be okay with it. So I want to wind down on these 3 brilliant questions that you offered recently to become more curious and begin a dialogue with our inner strength and wisdom. And feel free to give me a little tidbit or chunk or, example after each one. I'd love to hear your thoughts. So the first one being, what do you want me to know? So when you're sitting down, attempting to tune into that higher self, that inner strength and wisdom, what are some of the things that have emerged for you there? What do you want me to know?
Well, so many things. I remember, when I asked that question, people laugh. They're like, are you talking to the body part? I'm like, sometimes. Yeah, I mean, I'm talking. So one of the clearest things I remember is I was driving to an event and I had horrible indigestion and reflux, kind of heartburn, and I hadn't had it in a while. And so, the normal thing is to judge it, right? Oh, I wonder if it's something I ate, blah, blah, the whole thing. And I didn't. I breathed. I took a few breaths, and I literally, driving down the road, talked to my esophagus, basically. And
how great.
What do you want me to know? And the message that I got was that I don't need all the stuff, that actually I just need to get a little bit quiet and allow for my truth to be spoken. Right? And because all the stuff, the acidity, the gurgling, all of these things were just stuff. They were me piling on things instead of just saying what I really needed to say at the time.
So good.
Right. And so it's things like that. I mean, sometimes a headache is just a headache, but a lot of times.
But you don't know until you ask.
Correct. Right. And so I've been feeling really parched recently. There's a lot of stuff with my throat. A lot of how always has to be.
At least some throat chakra issues. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but the sense of like hydration, like I've literally been craving. So what, when I ask, hey, what do you want me to know? And it's, hey, hydrate me from the inside, right? Give me water, give me liquids, but it's because this is going to help you use your voice.
That's great. So the second one, what wants to emerge? I love that.
Yeah, I just get all tingly when I think about, I think when we ask that question, so there's a little bit of context, right? Whenever I engage with any of these questions, I invite people to just take a few breaths first. Three breaths is really all it takes to just kind of feel your feet on the earth and get a little bit grounded. Then you ask these questions. And when you ask, hey, what what wants to emerge, or what am I ready to let emerge, then, and you ask that question without grasping or wanting a specific answer to show up, right? It can be really surprising. Sometimes it's just, I mean, frankly, my podcast came from that question of what wants to emerge. And I knew that it was time for creating something was the answer that I got over and over again. I want to create something. And I've never thought of myself as a creator. I've thought of myself, as a teacher, as a guide, and I realized there's actually a way to use that to create. And so there's this, what wants to emerge. Sometimes it's just laughter. That's been, and, but we have to, my other favorite way to ask these questions that I think is important is, to go outside, right? To be in a place where you can pause for, it doesn't have to be a long time. It can be a minute, but giving yourself the opportunity to slow down enough to really hear what's there.
Yeah, that's really backed up in the psychological research too. The brain needs that different scenery around you just for, a couple of minutes. It's one of the reasons why classes are only about 45 minutes, because even allowing students to walk through the hall to a new environment helps reset and refresh. So I love that. Go outside and take a couple breaths and then ask.
Yeah. And the other thing in the what wants to emerge is it's a little bit like decluttering, right? When we think about decluttering physical spaces, we're really making space for the important stuff to be noticed, to stand out. So when we allow ourselves to ask this question, what wants to emerge, it's like sifting through that mental clutter and tuning into, hey, what's really important today, right? What is the one thing that wants to be elevated or amplified today within me? I mean, it could be as simple as love, right? What wants to emerge today? Love. I want to hold somebody's hand. I want to smile, right? Kind of that. I mean, and those are kind of those unexpected little ohs, right? And because we think it always has to be so big and grandiose, when really it's all about those little micro moments. And I think that those micro moments create ripples into the rest of our lives.
Definitely. So that brings us perfectly to the third one of, what energy do I need today? I love that question.
Tell me why you love it.
I love that question because as a woman and therapist who is really focused on those internal shifting states, sometimes when, we wake up, we're craving more of a sense of peace or stability. And other days, you just need someone to give you a little bit of Red Bull in your veins. Yeah. And so taking just a quick second and allowing yourself permission to want that thing, to name the thing, and then to invite that thing in, I think is revolutionary for your day. And so one of my favorite practices has been on the inhale, breathing that state in. So if it's peace, like feeling as though I'm taking in peace from the universe through my nostrils, and then exhaling whatever the opposite is that I'm feeling in that moment, usually related to stress. And it's both a science and a mystery of it. It works every time for me.
Absolutely. Well, and music does the same, very similar thing, helps me attune to that energy. So I oftentimes ask, what wants to emerge or what energy do I need today is a question in particular that I ask myself when I'm done with my morning practices, after journaling, doing some breath work. Sometimes it could just be looking at myself in front of the mirror in the morning while I'm brushing my teeth, right? But what energy do I need today is a reminder that each day is a little bit different. Like each season is a little bit different. Like, right. Each right to left side of our body is going to be a little bit different on some days. But it's that reminder that we do flow from the inside. If you think about, I like to pay attention to moon cycles, right? Full moon, new moon, all the different things. Yeah. And our body is made up mostly of water.
Yeah. Walking cucumbers.
Yeah. So with just like tides flow in and out, the energies that we're going to need are going to change and they're going to flow. And so acknowledging that, honoring that, that's what that question is to me of, hey, do I do I need exuberance today? Do I need radiance? Or do I need something restorative? Do I need the hug? Do I need the feeling of wind in my hair, or leaves underneath my feet, water, whatever it might be? But that energy, I think it helps you tap back into that feeling. To me, I think it almost always goes back to, how do I want to feel? And so there's that energetic component of that.
So good. So that brings me to this inner strength and wisdom you've come to name the sunrise in our pocket.
Yes, I have.
Which is the title of your podcast. Can you tell us more about it?
Yes. So to me, sunrise is the most magical time of the day. Mm-hmm. Everyone loves sunset pictures. To me, the magic about sunrise is that it comes from darkness, right? The darkness, you have to have darkness for sunrise to emerge. And because to notice it.
Yep.
And sunrise always happens. Even I'm looking out my window right now. It is gray. It's not pouring like it was 2 hours ago, but it is gray and overcast. But the sun still rose this morning, right? It's that one thing that we can have faith in. I mean, just like sunset, but that magic of it emerging from the darkness. And that to me is like the inner strength and wisdom that literally is in our pocket. We carry it with us everywhere we go. We don't need any special equipment, anything, any specific bodies to have it. We always have it within us, just like that sunrise. And so it's that reminder of, hey, that sunrise is in your pocket. That inner strength, that inner wisdom is in there. You just have to pause and tune into it and allow yourself to have that faith in it and know that it's a tool. It's a practice. It's a way of being and moving through the world with that knowing as your navigational guide.
Love it.
Yeah. And the podcast is really, they are short snippets meant to, get you out of your own way and help you reconnect back to that inner strength and wisdom, that sunrise in your pocket. So they're very lighthearted. They sound just like this, me having a conversation with myself. Mm-hmm. So there's laughter. They're
natural flow.
It is a very natural flow. It's been a lot of fun, and I'm having a great time kind of sharing these little nudges and helping. And it's really, I share them, but to me, the idea is I kind of wish that we didn't have to have life coaches, therapists, mm-hmm. in the sense that, but of course we always need somebody to hold our hand, or we often need somebody to hold our hand. And that's what I think is magical about the work that we do, right?
Right.
And so that's what this podcast is designed to be.
It's a perfect little reminder and a facilitation of that moment. It's that sparks awareness, and that is so needed and transformative. And I will have a link to that and your webpage in the show notes. Is there anything else you would love to share with the world?
Thank you. No, I'm super grateful. Thank you for this opportunity and it was such a delightful conversation. So you asked me some questions that I'm going to have to go back and think about. I'm like, what do I really think about that?
And we could have talked for 3 hours more because there was so many other questions that bubbled up, but I was like, nope, Tams, stay on this topic.
Well, it was so much fun. And if your listeners have any questions, I would love to connect with them. Happy to answer anything. And I look forward to just staying connected.
Elena, thank you once again. You're a joy.
Thank you so much. I'm such an honor.
Thanks for listening to the Sacred Psychology Podcast. I pray you found some inspiration and empowerment to go out and make this life the most fulfilling possible. You can follow Sacred Psychology on Facebook and YouTube. If you haven't yet, please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Tag us on social media and let us know what you think as well. Please note that the information provided is not meant to convey professional, psychological, or medical advice. If you could use such services, I highly recommend seeking them out from someone you trust. To get in touch with me personally or to see how we might work together, please check out ariatherapy.com or talesfromatrapezoid.com. Until next time, everyone.